In Nigeria, the manufacturing industry plays a crucial role in economic development. However, it faces numerous challenges and a significant policy deficit that impedes its growth. Within the Nigerian manufacturing landscape, several key subsectors dominate, namely cement and building materials, food and beverages, tobacco, chemicals from fertilizers, wood and textiles. Breweries and flour mills also contribute significantly to the manufacturing sector. In a proactive effort to enhance Nigeria's manufacturing sector, the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria (MAN) and the National Institute for Policy and Strategic Studies (NIPSS) recently organized a 3-day brainstorming session tagged towards 25% yearly growth for the manufacturing sector in Nigeria. That is what we'll be looking at on today's program. Thanks for joining us on Policy Focus. I am Chana Ejoga. More to come after the break.
Keep watching.
Keep watching.
Keep watching NIPSS Policy TV.
NIPSS is a very unusual place. It is the only place in Nigeria that is recognized as the center for thinking for Nigeria. And that is why when you come to NIPSS, we do unusual things. We believe that for any country to grow, manufacturing must be at the center of that growth.
Build a structure around it, and if you want to keep manufacturing, just focus on one and insist that
We are manufacturers. We understand what is happening to us, what pains we have. And like you said, we believe that the Institute is a think tank for government. We are going to listen to it.
We want to give you an idea of what the manufacturing landscape is.
Energy is key. You know, without energy, there's little you can do. It is what you use to produce, to use your operational values chain before you process your products, whether be it pharmaceutical, steel industry depends heavily on the use of power, and so other manufacturing sector depends on textile as well depends on them.
Nigeria's manufacturing sector experienced a resurgence in 2013, making it the largest in the continent. The industry primarily centers around major cities such as Lagos, Port Harcourt, Kano, and Ibadan, with millions of people involved in producing various goods and services, including household items, consumer products, automobiles, agriculture, mining, cement, and building materials. While manufacturing plays a crucial role in Nigeria's economy, contributing about 14% to the total GDP annually, the sector faces numerous challenges. These obstacles include issues with energy and power supply, multiple taxation from various government agencies, trade barriers, regulatory bottlenecks, inconsistent policies, and inadequate physical infrastructure. To address these challenges faced by the manufacturing industry, experts propose that the Monetary Authority re-evaluates its policies considering the fragile state of the Nigerian economy. They advocate for a low interest rate environment to support manufacturers and suggest the government focus on physical measures to internalize manufacturing inputs, ultimately reducing production costs. Over the years, the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria had suffered great setbacks, hence the reason for the brainstorming session at the National Institute. The meeting was geared towards interrogating workable policies that will promote development and fix the loopholes in the sector.
For 63 years, Nigeria as a nation has struggled to industrialize. We have struggled to be the manufacturing center of Africa.
The primary objective of this joint technical session is to develop a joint manufacturing policy agenda for new administration in Nigeria. Additionally, we hope to achieve a resilient and competitive manufacturing sector with significant contribution to the gross domestic product and job creation, amongst others. This is a milestone in the history of our relationship.
During the brainstorming session, the association lamented over the deteriorating state of the sector and the need to reach to government for implementation of workable policies through the National Institute.
In Nigeria, the major issue we have is the infrastructure, very bad, as everyone knows, in terms of the roads, the port congestion, electricity. It makes it access to funding as well for both forex for raw materials and also even for your business operations, machinery as well. It makes it almost impossible for you to conduct your business and remain competitive, because remember, as exporters, we manufacture made in Nigeria goods to put on the global map. We bring in forex back into the country to be able to compete competitively versus our counterparts out there. The cost of production cannot be so high that by the time you take your products out there, you're selling at a loss. Then what's the point in exporting?
Where you have exploitation, deforestation, and all the challenges that come with foreigners coming into Nigeria to tap what we have, taking out things with the porosity at the ports, at the borders, and no proper checkpoints to stop them from moving goods out of Nigeria or moving wood-related products out of Nigeria. So when that is done, you find that you can't keep up with any form of standardization. You're looking for raw materials to work with, and they're not there. Some smarter people have come in and taken it out there and brought it back again to Nigeria to sell back to you. Meanwhile, those resources were with you and they were cunningly taken out.
In 2022 alone, the proceeds that came into Nigeria from export were about $5 billion. $5 billion, forgive me. Imagine if we multiply that effect. The pressures we're having on forex would be almost sorted out. We're putting made in Nigeria products on the global market. We're bringing forex back into Nigeria. We're creating jobs as well. So it's a no-brainer for Nigeria to rally behind exporters and help to get more exports that qualify. You get your products out there, they're accepted, you sell, you bring your monies back in, you reduce pressure from the CBN, from forex, as well as creating thousands of jobs as well.
Many of the challenges that confront Nigeria have been resolved in our bookshelf, in our library. So when I got back, MAN decided that we're going to tap into the knowledge resource that is here. And this led to the birth of the collaboration. Since we started this collaboration, we have seen immense improvement in our advocacy, in terms of sharpening our advocacy approach.
To make the policy implementable, it is always good to have stakeholders' input. With stakeholder inputs, to be able to know what challenges they face. I always say, like people always say, he who wears the shoe knows where it pays or hurts. So they'll be able to tell you the problems, so you factor their problems, you discuss what you intend to do, and here is on how the implementation process could be achieved. This will help you to really craft your policy in a way that will be implemented. So when you have this one, engaging them properly. There's something we experience from the government at times. Okay, you want to call for stakeholder meetings, and the stakeholders coming should come with their views, document, proposal to support the subject matter. But to give them 3 days to come. He gets the letter today, 2-3 days he needs to be at the meeting. So the day he's going to the meeting will do nothing. Given that he has a flight on that day and it will be cancelled. Otherwise, he may have to even leave a day prior to the day of the meeting. And between these days, what can he do that will be meaningful? So what we expect at times is that it will be announced that yes, we have called all the stakeholders at the meeting, but were they really prepared to contribute meaningfully and bring well-informed opinion to the table? So this is another thing that we need to do. They should give in enough notice, and they should be called to the meeting, and they should. So that's number one. Number two, when you make a policy, if you made a policy, you want to be sure the policy stands, and it's not good to suffer any reversal or a policy that you can't tell what you have done initially.
Get a call at any time of the day from the industry players, especially when the regulatory agencies are threatening to seal their production facilities, maybe on an account of, I wouldn't say it's non-compliance to regulations, but then we've tried as hard as possible to get regulatory agencies to sensitize on any new policy that is meant for any industrial sector. And it's good that I mentioned here. It's good that I mentioned here that some regulatory agencies, because they are usually revenue driven, they would want to establish policies, regulations, bills, and laws without due recourse to stakeholder engagement. If there were to be pre-stakeholder engagement before concluding a policy, I do not see reasons why there won't be up to 95% compliance to the regulations. So because it's in those bills, those regulations, policies, and laws are intended towards revenue generation, so they wouldn't want to engage stakeholders for discussions, so it's difficult.
At the session, the Director General of the National Institute, Professor Omotayo, pledged to support the association by giving their recommendations a good push till it gets to the right source, where adequate physical measures will be put in place.
Keep watching.
Keep watching NIPSS Policy TV.
We introduce the issues, talk about concepts and policy thrust of energy security and industrialization. I will give real life case studies on energy security. I will take from Egypt and China, and I will make policy recommendations and conclude. So why am I making this presentation? The objective is to give an overview of concepts of industrialization and energy security, to highlight the development in industrialization and energy security in Nigeria, to examine the significance and challenges of energy security and how it affects industrial development in Nigeria, with special reference to the manufacturing sector. I'm sure you understand why. To provide a real-life case study of economists on the subject matter, and to finally highlight critical recommendations for improving Nigeria's energy security and stimulating industrial growth in Nigeria. In most economies, if not all, energy security and industrialization are two critical pillars of economic prosperity. A lack of energy security has historically hindered industrialization efforts, and energy accessibility, along with stability, is an integral part of industrial breakthroughs. Why? Energy is recognized to power the production and distribution network resulting from industrialization process. Security can hinder industrial development. The linkage between energy security and industrialization is better understood when one compares a given country's growth rate during a time of energy crisis and times of stability, and what happens to industrial growth or otherwise during this period. I mean, this reminds one of the oil crisis that the global economy suffered in the 1970s. The crisis took a toll on global industrial activities, especially in industrialized countries like the US and Japan, and high energy costs at that time led to sharp decrease in industrial production. This led many companies to forcefully cut back on operations or shut down. Indeed, higher energy costs and disruptions in energy supply hinder industrial activities, especially in manufacturing. This is obvious among economies that are heavily dependent on fossil fuels for energy. Economies like Denmark that have prioritized investment in alternative energy sources like renewable energy have been able to mitigate the adverse spillover effect of energy crisis on the industrialization process. Now let's talk about energy security particularly. This means having optimal access to uninterrupted, sustainable, affordable, and reliable energy sources for domestic, commercial, and industrial needs at all times. The International Energy Agency says that having access to adequate, sustainable, and affordable energy supplies, as well as the ability to manage uncertainties associated with energy production and consumption, that's how it sees energy security. Nigeria is a rich resource economy endowed with oil and gas, which accounts for a significant proportion of its total energy supply. Some key points about Nigeria's energy supply and security are highlighted below. This will give you an impression of how we have managed our energy security and things related to its supply or lack of it. Oil production is a key area where we get energy in Nigeria. Although Nigeria's oil production was slightly higher in January from the graph that you can see, and the first half of February 2023, the total oil production remained below the allotted OPEC quota of 1.8 million barrels per day. This suggests that Nigeria is underperforming in energy production and supply. You also note that in recent times you have heard that oil has been discovered in Bauchi and Gombe states, as well as in Nasarawa state. We hope that this may boost our oil supply. We have gas production. Natural gas is another important energy resource in Nigeria with significant reserve and potentials for domestic use. According to NBS, Nigeria's natural gas production rose from 192.6 billion cubic meters in 2010 to 245.1 BCM in 2019. Larger parts of the gas being used for power generation and industrial applications. However, Nigeria has continued to struggle to fully utilize its gas resources, and they are due to the fact that we lack infrastructure The policy and regulatory environment has not been adequate, and security concerns have continued to affect our gas production. Nigeria's gas consumption is rising and is driven by some form of industrial developments that we have witnessed in more recent past. We also have electricity generation and access. Nigeria has struggled with electricity generation and access for many years. I mean, we need no telling on this. Nigeria's electricity generation capacity was 12.5 gigawatts in 2020, with a natural generation of 4.9 gigawatts, resulting in frequent power outages and load shedding. I mean, it's one of the few very early phrases that Nigerian children have is off NEPA and so on. So it shows when NEPA gets its acts together. So power outage is very common. So where is Nigeria among its peers in power generation? We have given examples from China, USA, Brazil, Turkey. Egypt will be my favorite because I think that they have been able to achieve some growth, and it is very easy for us to compare them with Nigeria. Of course, you can see where Nigeria is standing. In the first half of 2022, Nigeria's total available generation capacity fell by 19.61% from 4,783 megawatts in January to 3,845 megawatts in June. You can see that what we have experienced in Nigeria is an oscillating performance, but in more recent times we have continued to suffer dips. There was a time that we had within a year or within half a year, we had 6 national grid collapse. I mean, this is an indication of crisis in that sector. Also, a total power generation dropped by 26.84% to 2,321 megawatts hour in June from 3,172.8 megawatts hour in January in the first half of 2022. The average power generation capacity drop, all these are figures that you can look through so that I do not take too much time. But it's instructive to say, to hear what the World Bank has to say in its 2014 survey, which says that more than 70% of farms sampled in Nigeria experienced power outage throughout the year. And you can see how it is reflected in the graphs that followed the survey. The situation of power supply has not improved since the World Bank survey of 2014, because between January and July 2022, the national grid, like I said, collapsed about 8 times. Most of Nigeria's trading partners, even in sub-Saharan Africa, now have improved access to electricity when you compare this with Nigeria. On the average, for example, and based on data from the World Bank, Ghana has up to 75% access to electricity. Of course, we know what is happening in Ghana now. They are in serious crisis, but these figures are true. Similarly, Kenya has above 65% and is in the graph opposite, while South Africa has above 70%, despite the power cut crisis battling the countries. Energy policy and governance. Nigeria's energy sector has been hampered by a range of policy and governance challenges, including corruption, inefficiency, and a lack of investment. Based on World Economic Forum Energy Transition Index, Nigeria ranked 131 out of 115, is the reverse, 115 out of 131 countries in 2021. I'm very happy to see that the participants are very sharp. I was going to crucify them. That was what we did a few years ago. So Nigeria has low scores in areas such as energy security, energy access, and environmental sustainability. In Nigeria, government has initiated a range of policy and regulatory reforms aimed at improving energy security. And they include privatization of the power sector, promotion of renewable energy, and the establishment of a legal and regulatory framework for gas development, such as the Petroleum Industry Act. Now we go to policy and institutional framework on energy security. Nigeria has initiated some policies in the quest for industrialization. In the pros, you have a more elaborate expansion on all of this. Among these policies are the National Energy Policy, NEP, 2015, which aimed at energy security, increasing access to modern energy services, promoting sustainable development, and encouraging the use of renewable energy sources such as solar, wind, hydro, and biomass, as well as promotion of energy efficiency measures. Electricity Power Sector Reform, that's EPSR Act of 2025, which was formulated as a legal framework for the reformation process in the industry. The Act facilitated the transfer of NEPA to PACN. It established subsequent privatization of the industry in 2013, where 6 generation companies, 1 transition company, and 11 distribution companies emerged. It established the NEC to regulate the new electricity generation, transmission, and distribution value chain. You have the Petroleum Industry Act, which also focused on the value chain, exploitation, administration, organization, and regulation of the industry, as well as funding private sector investment. The Act, and I think this is important, harmonized petroleum product pricing regulatory agencies, that PPPRA, DPR, and NMDPRA. I mean, these are the agencies that have continued to manage the process of the petroleum industry. It also established the National Upstream Petroleum Regulatory Commission. Now we go to industrialization, which is a more familiar terrain for me. Industrialization is the development of industries on a wide-scale basis. It involves a structural change from a traditional economy producing primary products to a modern, advanced manufacturing industry. It's generally said that it commenced in Britain in the 1760s and later spreads to France and Germany before moving to the United States of America. The rise of the factory system, the expansion of the textile industry, changes in the railroad network, and frontier technology advancement, all are significant milestones in Britain's industrialization. Now we look at industrialization in Nigeria. According to the African Development Bank, industrialization index, their index on Nigeria's industrial landscape is expanding, albeit with pitches along the expansion path. The index measures, which you can see, measures the industrialization growth in Africa. That's what you can see opposite. Out of 54 African countries, Nigeria ranked 10th in 2020, but fell by 7 points to 17th position in 2016. Note that the index score of Nigeria dropped from about 0.60 points in 2015 to 0.56 points in 2016. The decline is attributed to the economic recession that we all know Nigeria witnessed at that time. Nigeria's industrialization continued to grow after 2016. However, COVID-19 pandemic slowed the pace of industrialization, just like every other part of the world. In 2021, Nigeria's industrialization index scored further plummeted, that's the post-COVID-19, COVID-19 year, to about 0.605 points from 0.612 points in 2020. The decline in the index score means that Nigeria is actually deindustrializing, and you can see it on the opposite graph. The trend in the depth of industrialization, which is measured by Industrialization Intensity Index, in Nigeria relative to some of the major trading partners, suggests Nigeria is the least industrialized economy when you look at our trading partners, and they remain Netherlands, UK, China, and the US. Among the selected economies, China is the most industrialized, of course, as you can see, and the US and Netherlands have also achieved significant progress in their industrialization journey. Nigeria's industrial competitiveness performance is also the worst among this set of countries, as I've shown. Note that the decline in industrial development in 2020 2020 across Netherlands, China, US, and the UK, of course, had to do with COVID-19, which I mentioned. Industrial development in Nigeria has low competitiveness capacity, and this makes the sector disadvantaged in our trade relations with China and the rest of them. The manufacturing sector, which is the major driver of industrial development in Nigeria, is struggling with multiple setbacks. According to NBS, the sector grew by 5.89% in the first quarter of 2020 and fell to 3.0% in second quarter 2022. As at third quarter 2022, it has further contracted to 1.91%. On a yearly basis, the sector slowed to 2.45% in 2022, lower than 3.35% in 2021. The graph shows it. Now let's take a look at my organization to see how our members are doing. The total number of companies across our 16 branch networks stood at 2,863. This survey was actually done while I was preparing for this paper, so it's 2023. But the number of companies that are closed are 759. Kano, Bompai, Sharada, and Chalawa branch of our association accounts for the highest number of closures, which is 26.35%. This is followed by Ikeja branch, and then Osun, Ondo, Ekiti. They are all grouped in one branch by 17%. Umuahia branch had the least number, that's 0.79%. This does not mean that in terms of, it's just in terms of number. We have discovered that in the Northeast, where we have had insurgency, violence, and disruption of social life, we have had about 60% of our industries located in those places shut down completely. We are now embarking on advocacy engagement with the governments to see what could be done. I think in this case, the Northeast Commission should stop focusing on building rehabilitation camps and the rest, because when they get back to the society, they are going to have to make a choice whether to continue with violence where we can get money or to work in the industry. So the table in the next slide presents the current state. I'm just highlighting what's happening in Ikeja. Typically, for instance, there are 334 members. Those that are closed down, 188, and the number of moribund companies, 35. The reasons are opposite. High cost of electricity and power, influx of competing imports, most of them smuggled, high bank interest rate, we borrow at nothing less than 25 and it can go as high as 35. Forex scarcity, when we export and repatriate profit, we are not able to buy raw materials with at the forex that we have brought into the company. You have to pass it through the R&D window, and then you go to below the chain to buy at 2-3 times the cost. We have inadequate power supply, it's evident. We also have raw materials. Those ones we even source within the country. The disruptions in social life, violence, banditry, and insurgency has made it difficult. Then there are favorable government policy and the policy somersaults. This hits us below the belt, as they will say. And then there's lack of patronage. Even government will not buy what is produced in Nigeria. The executive order 003-005 has not been fully implemented. Probably government lacks the political will to do that. There are multiple taxes and levies by the 3 tiers of government. In one local government alone in Lagos, we have 163 taxes, levies, and fees. As a matter of fact, there's no difference between the two. Fees are to be charged for services rendered, but you could just receive fees for no reason. And then in Apapa, you also see the figure of closures. Now we look at policy trend and national framework on industrialization in Nigeria. There are quite a number of them, and they have reflected how government is thinking that the country could be industrialized. We've had the import substitution, which is the post-independence phase. Then we had the structural adjustment program when the economy went into a lot of challenges. All of these are fully expatiated upon in the prose. Then you have the National Industrial Revolution Plan, which to me looks like the most profound opportunity for us to advance industrialization. But then there was a change of government and there was lack of interest until later when we had the economic recovery plan that tended to rely on some of the issues made under NRP. You also have the National Automotive Industry Development Plan, which is actually something that is laudable, and if Nigeria is able to follow through, all the vehicles, so we can actually specialize in the production of this area. But then, in recent times, there has been a policy somersault because the duty on imported fully built vehicles was considerably lowered, and which made it unattractive for local assembly. We have the agricultural transformation agenda, backward integration policy, and national enterprise development program. All of these are attempts by government to show off the industrial production capacity of the country. We have challenges to industrialization in Nigeria. I have mentioned quite a number of them. Energy insecurity is one of it, and it impacts on industrialization, from supply chain disruptions, reduced investment and production activities, to dependence on foreign energy sources and raising production costs. For example, inadequate power of electricity has led to many manufacturing industries, like I said, closed down, and then relying on diesel to power the factories. Of course, the steel industry, for instance, cannot use generators. They have to rely on the national grid. And when it is short in coming, you cannot but understand why we have very high costs of building materials in the country. But the price of diesel, like you said, tripled within a space of two, 3 months. So the diesel price, and this is just what I explained, that steep movement closed down quite a number of companies, because at the same time, electricity supply was also going down. There are other challenges that we face: poor infrastructure, limited access to finance, as mentioned, unfavorable government policy, fuel and forex scarcity, and unavailable raw materials. In what follows are real-life case studies of, like I said before, China and Egypt, that have revived, broadened, and deepened their energy supply through several power sector development models. And they've been able to achieve record high industrialization over time, which Nigeria will learn from. Let's take Egypt, which is nearer home. Egypt has 26,229 megawatts installed electricity generation plant as at December 2015. And by December 2018, the country added about 28,229 megawatts to its electricity stock, resulting to total installed capacity of 55,000 megawatts. The following milestones were achieved in the process. Their fast-track projects, the government installed 3,636 megawatts in electricity in 8.5 months, with a cost of $2.7 billion. They installed another 14,400 megawatts within 2.5 years, following an understanding with Siemens. Converted moribund cycle power plants to 1,850 megawatts, which was also added to the grid, which reached 30% local content for wind farms in 2018. They constructed energy interconnectors with Jordan, Sudan, and Libya, with intentions for further expansion to other countries. They invested heavily in upgrade of transmission grids, substations, grid control centers, etc., to the tune of about $1.5 billion from 2017 to 2020. The government of Egypt also in 2012 approved the Egyptian solar plan, which includes adding 3.5 gigawatts of solar energy by 2027, with memoranda of understanding worth $500 million. Following the recent talks of energy transition, Egypt is working on increasing the supply of electricity generated from renewable sources to 33% by 2025, 48% by 2030, and 55% by 2035, and 61% by 2040. And the implementation of the plan will be anchored on private sector investment. So, these are also, I don't think I need to spend too much time on this, but they show the incremental pace at which Egypt has been advancing. Now let's go to China. China has a population of 1.41 billion in 2021, according to the World Bank. The country stands on the pinnacle of industrialization with an industrial output of $4 trillion in 2022. Electricity per capita of the country is 585 kWh, which is higher than the world figure of 3,081 kilowatts hour. Sorry, it's difficult for me to see this. China's energy source is well diversified, reflecting both non-renewable and renewable sources: coal, natural gas, thermal source, hydro, wind, solar, and biomass. I believe that this course may actually dwell on the issue of energy transition. And I think that we need to be very careful about how we engage in it, and it should not be another opportunity to recolonize us in the race for industrialization in the near future. Now, all the figures that shows the source, the generating capacity, and the share of the supply in China are listed below. In terms of exploration and production, energy exploration and production in China are aggregated as follows. 80% of liquid production comes from crude oil. Coal to liquid is 124,000 barrels per day. Methanol to liquid is 508,000 a day. Target of 1.5 in 2022, and increased capex by 4.6% in 2022. Recent policy aimed at energy security for China is the Energy Development Plan, and this is quite important, which is a 5-year plan for energy sector issued in 2006. However, following the global call for energy transition to mitigate the greenhouse effect, a 14-5-year plan for a modern energy system was issued by government. The documents provided detailed plans for the energy sector up to 2025. The idea of this figure is to show how forward-looking and how progressive these countries have followed the plan that they made. China's renewable energy targets are as listed below. It demonstrates that they are also thinking forward and seeing the departure from fossil oil advancing their industrialization process. Now, as depicted in the chart which is below, there is a positive correlation between the rise in the level of electricity accessibility and the growth of industrialization in China. And this is what is really important for us to know. The positive relationship between the two is quite apparent before the COVID-19 outbreak. The COVID-19 pandemic that weighed in on China's industrial performance, as you can see on the other side. So it really shows that the two of them cannot be separated, and there is need for an effective management of it. The gradual decline, as you can see, even in the industrialization process of China, is that China is now concentrated on investing outside of China, and we can see the example in Africa. Now, there are policy lessons to be learned from these two countries. The brief overview of energy situation in China and Egypt provides critical policy lessons that can spur sustainable development of energy and electricity in Nigeria. The lessons include development and proper implementation of a national energy policy that ensures that all available energy resources are well explored. Deliberate investment by the government in the energy sector while encouraging private investment. Electricity development plan with balanced energy mix. A national renewable energy plan. Electricity plan that will take energy transition into account. Now let's take a look at some policy recommendations having had this background. This is where when you subscribe to NIPSS Policy TV MAN, you will see some inadequacies. Fortunately for me, I'm not scoring any marks, so I have the liberty, but I think it will be good for us to take a look. On the left side, we have said renew the Nigeria energy policy to explore. review the Nigerian energy policy to explore all energy resource and add gas flaring. We believe that this could be done in 1 year because it's actually a policy, but we need to take into account the transition. In Nigeria, usually any year for transition, less attention is paid to the economy, and the politicians will have to do what they have to do. The transition, the president has formed a transition committee. It is hoped that maybe now that the elections are concluded, a leader has emerged. I'm sure there will be court processes. I hope they get on with it. And then we settle down to business. So this 1 year may not necessarily be 2023. It will be too ambitious for us to think that a lot of work will be done this year. We can only hope that the government settles down to business. Now, there are implementation agencies, quite a number of them, that are relevant to achieving these tasks. Another one is improved energy sector infrastructure. The agencies that are responsible.
Keep watching.
Keep watching.
Keep watching NIPSS Policy TV.
Thanks for joining us on Alumni Time. I am Chana Ejoga. Today we'll be looking at the Alumni Association of the National Institute, which is the umbrella body for all graduates of the Senior Executive Course of the National Institute for Policy and Strategic Studies, NIPSS Kuro. Today we have the president of the association, who is Ambassador Emmanuel Obi-Okafor, MNI. It is a pleasure to have you, sir.
Thank you very much.
So, can you tell us what was your experience as a participant?
It was quite very inspiring. I was here in 2007, Sec 29, and it was quite an experience when you have about 60 members drawn from several institutions across the country at the topmost level of their career, stay 10 months together. It was quite very inspiring and very exciting, considering that JOS also was a very hospitable environment then. I'm still in touch with all my mates. In short, we have a platform. We call ourselves Namu Namu, our own. And we produced a lot of persons who are in the various key policy-making decisions in the country. It was quite 16 years ago. And each time I come to NIPSS, I still feel inspired. And we have every inspiration to give back to government for what it has done to our professional and private lives. Coming together here was quite a very good experience. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So you said each time you come back to NIPSS, which means you've been coming frequently.
Yes.
Is there anything that has changed for you, despite the nostalgic feeling?
Yes, a lot has changed. I can't find my way around NIPSS any longer. Wow. 2007, when I was here, there were not quite so many buildings. The hostel was not there. The new director of studies edifice was not there. So a lot has changed. Even when I was here in June, when we came for the AGM, we turned the sod for the new building. And surprisingly today, it's almost getting completed. Yeah, a lot has changed, and it's positively anyway.
Yeah, thank you so much.
For which we are very grateful to the management of NIPSS.
That's nice. So can you tell us, how did you become president of the association of ANI?
Yeah, well, it's quite very interesting. There was an AGM on the 24th of June, just about 3 months ago. And I also would like to put it on point that I was the former vice president.
Wow.
I was the vice president for one term under former IGP, MD Abubakar. So I was groomed. And of course, taking over from the mantle was not very difficult because I had been a vice president before. I wouldn't say it's the first time a vice president became a president, but I'm only saying that it was an election that I overwhelmingly won to the glory of God.
So can you tell us the processes? What does it really take? As in, what are the criteria? What are the processes that you had to undergo to become, before you emerged as president?
Yeah, you must have commitment. I can tell you that when I left NIPSS in 2007, I had been very active in all NIPSS affairs, especially the Alumni Association Abuja chapter, where I'm still a member. I can tell you that 2008, I was appointed a member, secretary of the Foreign Relations Committee under General Ike Nwachukwu. And all throughout the period, I had participated in various alumni functions and activities. I had been a member of the Lands Committee. I've been the chairman of the Policy Innovation Committee. I've been the deputy chairman of the Security and Defense Committee. So I had been very active. And probably in the recognition of all this, my overall performance and my engagement with ANI affairs, I have even hosted Abuja chapter to a meeting. Wow. I funded the meeting to show you that I love ANI. And due to this passion, I was overwhelmingly voted for.
That's good. It's a very interesting procedure and process to hear. And then what I really liked about what you said is the level of commitment, which means it also comes with consistency.
That is true.
So I want to also ask, have there been any pressure arising from the narrative that ANI is an elitist group? And what is your reaction to that?
Well, ANI is actually an elitist group if we're to look at it from that perspective. Because there are certain qualifications and criteria before you can become or participate in NIPSS. You must be a director in any of the federal government establishment, or you're a permanent secretary from the states. And for the states, you have only an opportunity of once every 4 years. So participants of ANI are carefully selected because they're expected to give back to the system what they have learned within the next 10 years. And if you reflect on those who have ruled this country, or those who have performed at a high level in this country, dating back to 1979 when NIPSS was established, you find them in the molds of President Ibrahim Babangida, you have President Abdul Salami, you have all captains of industries, you have top military and police and security service chiefs. They've all passed through ANI. So for those who claim ANI is an elitist organization, they're not far from the truth, because not everybody attends NIPSS. Only carefully selected personalities who are expected to give back. You can only give back if you have the ability to absorb. Thank you.
So as president of ANI, what are the dreams? What dreams do you have for Nigeria and the Institute?
Yeah, you find that the principal motive of establishing NIPSS is to be a policy bedrock for the country. Our dream is that we shall develop to the point that we can make good policies for government. You find that recently, some Nigerian governors went to Rwanda when we have NIPSS. NIPSS has the potential to provide all that we need for this country. And from 1979 till date, NIPSS has churned out several policy papers. A lot of them have been implemented by government. You say, we don't like going around beating our chest that, oh, this policy is from NIPSS, this policy is from NIPSS. Virtually, government listens to NIPSS. That is why the office of the vice president is in charge of NIPSS. And every year, government gives us themes for study and research for government. So my dream for NIPSS is that we'll continue to focus more on policy making for the government, and that it will get to a point that government cannot do without NIPSS. So far, we have had wonderful cooperation from government, and NIPSS have lived up to its expectation.
So can you tell us, you've said a lot of things that is inspiring about NIPSS. Are there any challenges that the association is going through, and how are you handling it as the president?
Yeah, every organization has challenges. We are worried that NIPSS is not properly funded, and we have embarked on a lot of advocacy on policies issues that have been churned out from NIPSS to enable government to implement some of them. So these are some of the challenges that the government need to look more inward towards funding NIPSS to be able to carry out the mandate for which it was established. Other countries, you have endowment fund run into billions of dollars. And as ANI, we want to partner with NIPSS in this regard. Recently, the DG has launched an endowment fund. We are going to key into this project and attract eminent ANI members and other organizations that have interest and who are stakeholders in ANI and NIPSS to key into this fund, to be able to make NIPSS independent, to be able to carry out all the projects they have in mind, wonderful projects that are being constrained by lack of funds. So we intend to embark on several advocacies to make sure that our policies and the research output from NIPSS are implemented and used by government.
Thank you so much for your time. We're honored to have you on Alumni Chat.